All right, it is 6:40 p.m., Monday, February 11th, 2019. I call the meeting of the Planning and Development Committee to order. We have a quorum. And our first order of business is approval of the regular meeting minutes of January 28th. Do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
Any discussion about the minutes? Then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you very much. So our first item of business, P1, is a Resolution 13-R-19 approving a plat of re-subdivision for 2102 Darrow Avenue. Do I have a motion to approve? Yes, Alderman Ruth Simmons. Is there a second? Alderman Ruth Simmons, you want to address this item?
Yes. I'm asking for support in this long blighted structure in the neighborhood that has been an eyesore and also a hazard. The funds are coming from a blight reduction fund that can use specifically for blight reduction, and I'm asking your support. It did go to a competitive bid. I know there had a couple questions. There were 5 or 6 bids, and the Skokie demolition.
Alderman Ruth Simmons.
It's the wrong one.
Michelle Mason Cup. I think this is the wrong property.
it sure
I
is.
think you're speaking about 2020 Green Bay Road.
I got all into it, didn't I?
But I'm sure they appreciate the information.
You guys are just letting me go?
But this is one that you know about.
Oh, I know about this one too. Okay. So, 2102 Darrow. It is not blighted. It actually is a very important address. Excuse me, everyone. So this one is to be subdivided for additional single-family residences, and I'm in support of this one as well. The footprint of the house is in compliance with our current zoning and is not looking to exceed that, and for that reason I'm in support. It is an underutilized lot that has opportunity to add additional housing to the neighborhood. I'm asking your support for this house as well.
Okay. So do you want to sort of restate the motion just to make sure that we're all...
P1, city staff recommends adoption of Resolution 13-R-19 approving the proposed re-subdivision of the property located at 2102 Darrow Avenue. It's for action.
And did I have a second? Okay. Any further discussion? Then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you. We've approved that. And ordinance P2, 12-0-19, granting a special use for a Type 2 restaurant, Spice, at 1905 Church Street. The Zoning Board of Appeals and city staff recommend adoption of the ordinance, granting a special use for a Type 2 restaurant, Spice. In the B2 district and the West Evanston Overlay District, the applicant has complied with all zoning requirements and meets all the standards for a special use for this district. And Alderman Ruth Simmons, would you like to make the motion to approve?
Move approval.
And you were approving, you wanted to have suspension of the rules for this?
Yes, I'm asking that we move forward for action on this. The applicant has been completely compliant and responsive. She is coming fully funded, not requesting any support from the city, and is ready to get her restaurant open.
Okay. Any discussion? Then all in favor of the motion for introduction and action of the special use for a Type 2 restaurant, Spice, on Church Street, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And didn't I say that? I said introduction and action. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. But yes, suspension of the rules. Okay. That's moving right along. P3 is ordinance 11-0-19, granting a special use for another Type 2 restaurant, Phil's Coffee at 1030 Davis Street. Zoning Board of Appeals and city staff recommend adoption of the ordinance, granting special use approval to for a Type 2 restaurant, Phil's Coffee at 1030 Davis Street in the downtown retail core district. The applicant has complied with all zoning requirements and meets all the standards for a special use for this district. And Alderman Wilson, would you like to make the motion?
Sure. I move that we introduce and suspend the rules and take action on granting the special use for the Phil's Coffee. So, okay.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, then please say aye.
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 Opposed, no? Okay, we are all set. This is item P4, ordinance 112-0-18. Yep, granting major zoning relief for building lot coverage, setbacks, and open parking at 2626 Reese Avenue. The Zoning Board of Appeals recommends denial of the ordinance for major zoning relief for 3 variations. The Zoning Board of Appeals determined the proposal does not meet all standards for major variation. We have, early this morning, received, I guess, a new proposal from the applicant, and Alderman Suffredin, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. That's unusual to get a new proposal on the morning of a meeting. I think it's not fair to the applicant or the neighbors for us to even entertain that. So I'd ask that we table that to a future meeting when there'll be enough time for everyone to review and understand exactly what's being proposed.
Okay. So, Alderman Wilson?
I'd second that. I don't feel like I've had enough time to really look at it or give it appropriate thought.
Right, okay.
Could we know when the future meeting is? Date certain.
Well,
We could leave it open-ended, but,
I think, and I know there are a large number of the neighbors here. Some of them may have signed up for public comment.
I have one person signed up, Richard Horsting.
I think in the interest of fairness, we should find a meeting time that works for the neighbors that are here as well as the applicant. The neighbors have attended several meetings between ZBA and Planning and Development, and they deserve an opportunity to be heard. So without the presence of the applicant, I don't know what the proper date is. So I'd ask that we just hold it over and then find the appropriate time based on the schedules of the majority of the people involved.
Okay.
Okay. And I think you've got enough contact points to make sure everybody knows about the new date.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. All right. Mr. Horsting, did you want to say anything, or? Should I go to the dais? Up to the podium, yes.
Oh, wait, are there more signatures, Madam Chair?
For P, oh, I'm sorry, so you're right, there are.
Okay,
There are
thank
at
you.
the bottom, I was overlooking them, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Suffredin, for allowing me to speak. This has been going on now for 3 years. It started January 2016. Somehow or other, this man, Mr. James, gets away with these little behind the curtain Wizard of Oz switching times, dates. He one night spoke to the zoning board and took up 3 hours, giving us exactly no time to speak. Luckily, the neighbors were so stubborn, we actually stayed that night, I think at least till 12 o'clock to get our point across. This cost me tonight $375. My lawyer was going to be here. I had to pay him anyway because he scheduled the time. I am the neighbor next to it on the south side, which the egress that the issues that would be caused by building on a lot where the ZBA has already denied it twice unanimously is kind of getting a little ridiculous and a little tiring after 3 years. This is just another situation where he's pulling a lot of us that are professionals, especially my very concerned neighbors that have to take the time and the money and to get away from things we'd rather be doing. So please keep this in mind if we come before you again. That this has been going on 3 years with not only the city not sending out proper notices. This happened 2018 before Labor Day, where they had the sign go up without a date when it was supposed to be scheduled, a sign missing, and none of us received any postcards, which is, I guess by law, you should have to give us plenty of notice so we could be there. It's also, my attorney is going to speak about the amazing amount of stress that's putting on me when the signs do go up, because I get literally 5 people a day coming by, 5 people a week coming by, either realtors or lawyers, thinking that my house is the one that's for sale or going to be torn down or is involved in this. I've been in this house 33 years. My family's owned it for over almost 100 years, and it's getting to be just discouraging. I appreciate Mr. Sufferding has been very patient. My neighbors have been very patient, but please consider this when you realize this is probably the 4th or 5th time this builder has done this. And also, please look at the plans that he's put together that are rather deceptive and fraudulent, which means he's trying to really kind of not portray my home or others accurately. And that's why my attorney is going to be here to kind of show you the discrepancies this man has shown. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you. And I did overlook some people at the bottom of the page here. So Joseph Parody, did you want to say something? And I know this is not technically allowed if we've got a motion for tabling, but
It hasn't been actually tabled yet. You didn't vote on it.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have more remarks, but I did want to address at the last P&D meeting, there were 4 requests that members of the P&D made for us to go back, and I wanted to review those because I wanted you to understand what we've done with those. We took those seriously. First was a meeting about alternatives. You'll see in the packet that the meeting was held. I provided and the applicant provided summaries of that meeting. Unfortunately, that meeting didn't provide any additional guidance to the neighbors, since the proposed designs were not ones that the applicant agreed he would actually build. The second was a consideration of combining the lot at 2626 and the lot at 2624, which had been done 1 block east many, many years ago. The applicant has indicated in writing that he has no interest in pursuing that option at this time. The third ask was an offer by the neighbors to purchase. I made an offer to purchase the property for $25,000 with the intention to have the property remain undeveloped for the benefit of the neighborhood. That offer was declined by the applicant. In fourth, there was a request for comparison to other development on similar lots. This has been provided by city staff in the packet, but the information provided does not allow a comparison between the requested variances for other properties and this proposal. The fact that only one of the 22 properties has been developed in the last 55 years means that almost all the properties were developed under different rules for the zoning ordinance, so they may have been conforming at the time they were developed. Finally, I'd like to note that I provided additional written materials for this hearing, delivered via email to all of you yesterday. These materials respond to issues with the memo from city staff, but also to the lengthy letters from the applicant, which were withheld by city staff until the packet was issued, thus not allowing any response from the citizens of Evanston. I would prefer that there would be greater transparency from city staff in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Miller?
(2831) Hartzell, across from the the lot. I'm Mr. Horsting's neighbor, and I've come before you on behalf of like 28 families. I want you to know that we've been organized from the very beginning, and the beauty of this whole situation is it has brought us together. We have met more neighbors and had more fun, and it's such a variety of people. Now, I wouldn't say that that makes it easy for our aldermen, because we do not speak with one voice, and we all have different opinions about this house. But there were 4, as Joseph pointed out, 4 things we can agree on. And when I look at this new proposal as it with the other ones, I don't think it answers any of the problems about the permeable surfaces for water runoff, the alley sightlines that are serious concern for safety, because this is a commercial alley And none of the lots that Joseph or the city staff has pulled up really have a commercial alley. That makes a big difference. The alleys and homes on our commercial alleys from Central Street all have sight lines. They have small fences, and everybody is very careful about this. But putting a parking pad and a garage that close to an alley, this commercial alley, this is dangerous. What I've seen does not necessarily solve this, and exceeding the maximum lot coverage, that's still an issue. And of course, last but not least, to us in our neighborhood, where we've lost a lot of houses on Lincolnwood, is harm to the trees. There's no way you repair those. So we want you to consider this when you start looking at this new proposal, that this is a serious concern for us. I had lost three trees, either on my property, on my parkway, or right beside my neighbor's house. I want you to know that we just do not feel that this gentleman is answering our concerns on these issues. And I'm not sure what the incentive is, but I want you to take that into consideration when you reschedule this. What we think is fair is that any new proposal should go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. I don't think I have to remind you of that they're your experts. They're people who are experienced and practiced in the zoning ordinance, and I have to say they have bent over backwards on this. When they talk about going to midnight, those people sat through this. They've had extra time and extra hearings, and to say otherwise is dishonest. If this is a new proposal, which it is, it should go back to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So I ask you, when you come back to consider this, I think you need to reject it and let it start all over again with serious consideration of what's being proposed. That's why we have all of these different commissions and boards, and we believe we should follow the rules. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then we have one last speaker, Scott Kirkpatrick.
Hi, I'm Scott Kirkpatrick at 2904 Hartzell Street. So my property abuts the property in question. I won't go into a lot of detail because I think both Joseph, Kathy, and Dick covered most of it. And for Joseph's pullout, the one thing I would ask and adhere to or support is the transparency of the process. I think as a group of neighbors, we've been befuddled, confused, unsure, unclear of what the process is as the rules constantly seem to be changing. And from the beginning, we've only wanted a fair and deliberate process. And so we feel like that's an important part in every government, and particularly ours locally. Secondly, for Kathy, I'd like to expound upon is the ZBA hearings and meetings. Excuse me. The applicant portrayed the ZBA as, and he said to us in one of our meetings that he could never get a fair hearing in front of the ZBA and does not think they were fair at all. And in fact, that's quite different from what they said. I've been at every single meeting and every single event, and the ZBA said, yes, you know what, we think this lot is buildable, but we don't think you've gone to the extent that you can in order to accommodate the guidance that the ZBA has been given by the ordinances to have the least amount of variance to the major variations. And so to me, they're saying to him, we're going to be reasonable, but you need to be reasonable in the designs you present to us. So that seems to be quite the opposite of a fair hearing. In fact, I would say the ZBA was very fair to him. So I just want to encourage you to pass it on to the ZBA, the appropriate board. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So parliamentarily, so we have a motion? Right. Okay, so we have a motion to continue with the tabling of this item until a date unknown, that we will, Alderman Suffredin will work with the applicant and the neighbors to determine which of our planning and development meetings is most suitable. Corporation Counsel is looking puzzled over there. Oh dear. Double check the rules here.
It doesn't say that you have to continue it to date certain.
We can leave it open-ended?
You can.
Okay, all right. Then all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, so Alderman Suffredin will be in communication with neighbors to make sure we pick a Monday that's going to work for the majority of the people. All right, then we're now ready for P5, which is Ordinance 4-0-19, granting a special use permit for a planned development located at 1714, 1720 Chicago Avenue, and amending the zoning map. Do I need to read the whole thing, or can we just go right to business? So I understand that we have a new proposal.
I'm going to move introduction.
Okay, yeah, Alderman Fisk.
I move introduction.
Okay. And,
And we can talk about the new.
okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. And then my understanding is there's a new proposal?
Yes. Oh, would you like to invite the
Yes, okay.
developer's
Yes.
representative
Yeah,
to
please.
speak?
Right.
Good evening. I'm Paul Janicki, Paul Janicki Architects. And, last time we were here, we had a lot of discussion about some points that were, seemed like a big impediment to kind of moving forward. I think there was there's a lot of discussion about the original proposal and what the contract called for that we have with the city. So we listened to those comments and we went back, and what we've basically done is we've taken what was a 4-level parking garage and we brought it back down to the 3-level parking garage that we originally proposed. We also took the 9 stories of office space that we originally proposed in the plan development, and that's now back to the original 8 stories of office space that was originally proposed in the original city documents and with the contract with the city. Thirdly, another issue was parking. As we've gone back and forth on the parking many times, it's very difficult, but what we've done is reverted back to the original scheme of the 3 levels, and that 3 levels gives the city back 74 spaces, that the contract asked for 74 spaces to be replaced as public parking with meters, and that is what we are now proposing. If you look at the building on the left, that was the plan development proposal, and the building on the right is the new lower version. If you maybe go to the next slide, Scott. Or do I have the thing, or oops, sorry. Oh, thank you. On the left, you see the plan development proposal that we made several weeks ago. It's actually been in the funnel for a while, and the one on the right is the one with the 3-story garage with the 8 stories of office space above. And then the last slide is simply an elevation a comparison between those 2 schemes. I should also mention that the developers agreed to lease spaces in the Church Street garage for tenants of the new building office space.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So committee, yes. Alderman Nguyen.
Is this proposal in writing somewhere?
Sure, it can be in writing. I think we did write actually something I sent to Wally today and to Steve Haggerty, and I copied Judy on it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's in writing basically. Yes, just exactly what I just said. It's in written form.
Well, okay. So what does the parking look like? A floor plan of the parking look like?
It's identical to the way it was before.
Just lower.
Just one level taken off the top. Identical. Right. There's no below grade. Yeah.
No, there's no below grade.
It's just less parking.
Right. And so how many spaces are you asking for to lease in the Church Street garage?
50. 50.
Okay, and for what period of time? I mean, I'd really like to know a lot. I mean, this is not enough information to make a decision. Mm-hmm. I mean, the materials we have in the packet are really detailed. I mean, this is...
We have, the drawings are still here. The same drawings are in this packet. So if you want me to scroll through them, I could.
No, I'd like you to explain the terms of what are what you're asking to lease in the city parking garage? Am I not making words come out, Paul? Because
I'm not
you're
understanding what you mean exactly.
I'd like to know, so what are you doing with the office parking? Only 50 spaces?
50 spaces.
That's all that office it needs is 50 parking spaces?
There's 120 available spots according to the traffic engineer in that garage. So 120 cars could sensibly park in that garage. But we are actually leasing 50 spots so we can offer it to tenants. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
and then what are the terms that your original proposal asked for to lease spaces for only 1 year, and you were also looking at the Sherman Avenue garage and the Maple Avenue garage.
Do you want to speak to this maybe, Greg, or about that? Because maybe you can help. Because this is a legal, sounds like more of a legal thing and not an architectural thing. Did we talk about a 1-year lease before? Is that what we?
Yeah, that was in the proposal the last time.
Okay, all right.
And you were also looking at, is that correct? Is someone here who can answer? Are you still looking at Sherman Avenue and Maple Avenue?
Well, whatever was in the last proposal, we'd agreed to. The city staff thrust upon us how many parking spots we need to lease in
Thrust upon you? What do you mean by thrust upon you?
The reason we changed it in the first place is because they told us to change the garage and bring it up. The city staff did.
The city staff told you to
when we
raise the
went-
garage?
The reason the original proposal changed was the city staff told us to change it. So we changed it
And
to a
what
higher
reason-
garage to accommodate more parking. And then we're back to our original proposal where they told us we had to have a 1-year lease across the street to accommodate the parking. That's in the original agreement. So I'm agreeing to what was told by city staff to do. Does that answer your question?
No, not at all. I'm really confused.
Well,
I'd like this in much more detail. I don't understand why the city staff would tell you to add parking to the building, and then for the office, when they knew the agreement was for 74 parking spaces.
Paul, do you want to come up here and explain how the parking came to be?
And Alderman Fisk, did you want to?
I'm not done.
No.
Right.
Okay, but I think Alderman Fisk maybe had an answer for you, or
Right. When we understood that there was going to be a problem with fitting all of the required parking on site, we had a meeting with city staff in the Aldermanic Library, and we looked at various responses to that. If we didn't, and I'm using the term we, meaning if they didn't use the Church Street parking garage, that would have pushed the building up to a height no one wanted. And so the thought was that tenants could use the Church Street parking garage, but all of the 74 spaces on the surface lot would be replaced within the building, which is what we originally asked them to do. So they're correct in saying that it was staff's recommendation that we'd like more parking within the building, but given that the impact on height, the better alternative was to put those tenant parking spaces across the street. I mean, we've done that before. That's not unusual for us to do. There is plenty of parking there. I think Jill Valen is here tonight. She's looked at that, and that seemed to be most consistent with what the original plan was. And I have to say that I appreciate trying to work this out, because they were trying to balance a number of different things on the project, and I think the conclusion actually turned out to be a good conclusion.
so back to Alderman Nguyen, did you have?
Yes, I'd like to know has anything changed with respect to the alley being compromised?
Well, the alley, first of all, it's not compromised. It's a dogleg now. It will be a dogleg when we're done. What do you mean by compromise exactly?
Well, that's the quote directly from Dapper, from our professional engineer, the city's professional engineer, who said that putting a dog leg in this alley was going to compromise its functionality.
Right, and all due respect to the engineer at Save Evanston, they didn't do studies like our engineers did, and they also didn't have the fire department actually come to the site and drive gigantic vehicles to the site to determine that it was indeed safe. So when you say compromised, I'm not sure that's really an honest depiction of what's happening here.
Well, that was her professional opinion, and I trust professional engineers.
Well, we have a professional engineer here who did all the diagrams. There was no diagram from the city of Evanston. They did no studies for traffic. They did no studies for car counts. They did no studies for car radiuses or truck radiuses or fire truck radiuses. So I'm just sorry. It's just apples to oranges. You have an engineer that's a professional engineer who's done lots of projects like this, thousands, and they did all the due diligence to show that that alley is workable and safe. But you're depending on an engineer who did no research whatsoever on it, and that's an opinion of theirs, but it's not actually vetted with research.
Well, I disagree with you, and your professional engineer is being paid by the developer of this project, and our professional engineer is being paid by the taxpayers of Evanston, many of whom use that alley. So I respectfully disagree with you. So
That's fine. We really disagree.
I also think there are other issues here about loading for this building, so that trucks have to back up from Church Street to the loading dock. Is that unchanged?
Trucks back up on Church Street now to the loading dock.
No, I'm saying they have to back up the alley, Mr. Janicki.
No. Most trucks do not have to back in anything. The fire trucks don't have to back in.
No, I'm asking about the trucks that are unloading at this office building.
Same thing. The kind of trucks that will be using, and maybe you can be speaking
That's
to
not
this.
what was presented in the packet.
What we tried to show in the packet was we were specifically asked by staff to show what would happen with semi-trailers. And we're all along.
Which are frequently in all of those alleys.
Actually, that's another thing I disagree with. They're really not. But we see other trucks in the alley. We see some panel trucks. We see vans, but they don't need to back down an alley. Fire trucks don't have to back down the alley, and they're gigantic. But I will let you maybe talk more. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Good evening again, Steve Corcoran with Erickson Engineering. It was our firm that prepared all those diagrams, and in essence, the truck, we did the worst case. We assumed the semi-trailer, which they have to provide some service to this building, and they can come from the north, make a turn down, make the S-curve. They do back up a short distance to get into the truck dock itself, and then they could exit out onto Church Street, and that's what our diagram showed. So there's no backing in from Church for this building for semis. They come in from the north and they exit to the south, which is the opposite of what the library does. They come in from the south and exit to the north. So there's minimal back. I mean, there's obviously the last 20, 30 feet they got to back up and then they get to the docks either for the library or for this building, but they don't have to back up from Church.
So, and there is a turning, you can turn down that alley from the north in a semi, with the semi-trailer, an 18-wheeler?
Yes, it should be in your packet, although we did it for both the library as well as for our building, both to get to the dock and then after when they leave for the dock. So those are in there.
Thank you.
And then I just want to clear one thing about the parking. The 1 year is, my understanding of what the city wanted with the 1 year lease is that to see that they're going to all be used, because we're making, Evanston has a great public transportation system, and we may be overestimating the number of parked cars, but we went conservative in terms of the numbers. So the city just basically said after a year, if we're not using all those leased spaces, some of those would revert back to the city and they can use for other things.
So what do you anticipate the time period for the office building to become fully leased?
we close on the property within the next 6 months, we feel that we would be able to break ground as soon as we would get plans available, full mechanical, electrical, plumbing plans. And that could be another 6 months, and then it's an 18-month construction period.
So, but no, my question was, after the building,
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
that's right, after you get your certificate of occupancy, how long will it be before the building is fully leased? What is your estimate?
After we would get a C of O, we would, to be 100% leased?
Yeah.
Well, I would think we would be at least 65 to 70% leased at C of O, and then we would have another 20 to 30% to go.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is because when we have had these agreements before with buildings about how much parking, when they've used off-site parking, we've established a 5-year time period to go back and look, because we recognize buildings after 1 year really are not functioning fully as they would be after several more years. And so that's why I'm asking when you think, because after 1 year, you may not even be fully leased. And so how can we know that that's adequate parking that you're leasing over in Church Street Garage?
I understand your point, and point taken. Then we would go 2 years. I mean, I don't see the building. This building is needed, and I think within less than a year and a half, we'd be 100% occupied.
So how many employees would be working in the building?
Well, this question, look, I know that the people to my right are going to come and stab me because I haven't said approximately, but it's all depending on what tenant comes in. Basically, there's a formula, and I got ripped because the formula wasn't exact. We're talking approximately, and it's not going to be all employees from 9 to 5. There's certain people that might work 8 to 4, 7 to 3. So it varies, and to put just a rough number on it.
Right, that's what I'm looking for.
It could be anywhere from 300 to 500 employees, and they're going to kill me because I said 3. It could be 400, could be 500, could be in different times. So it all depends on who the tenant is. That's.
So,
Thank you.
Alderman Nguyen.
That's all I have.
So, Ms. Mason-Cup, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a little bit of information. Under the ordinance 4019 on page 7, it has some information regarding the long-term parking. It indicates that city staff requires as a condition for the plan development ordinance that the applicant would enter into a long-term parking lease. So it's unclear to me where the 1 year comes from. It's certainly not articulated in the ordinance that would be approved by council.
Okay, thank you. So I have lights first from Alderman Wilson and then from Alderman Rainey.
Okay, I think Alderman Nguyen asked most of the questions, but just so I'm clear, I think I misunderstood. The new proposal doesn't go below grade, correct? It stays at grade?
That's correct, Alderman Wilson. We looked at the idea of going below grade down to the water table, and it just actually made less sense as far as parking numbers. By the time you got to ramp down and try to get underneath the lobby and then to turn and come back, it actually was less efficient than just the plan we originally had.
Okay.
So,
then the other, I think, again, Alderman Nguyen covered much of it, but with regard to the engineering and the alley, one of the, I understand like the physical, actual, science of getting the truck down and making the turn in the radius. And I guess the thing that I'm personally a bit more concerned about right now are what I'm going to call the intangibles. And so over the years, issues have come up with regard to the fact that this is a, shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So this is a cut through for students, for library patrons, for people who live in the apartments. And a lot of people use that alley to cut through. So it is fairly heavily trafficked. There have been some incidents and at least one accident of a very grave nature. And I've been out at the site, long before there was an idea of having a building on the library lot. So, these are, I think, those are realistic concerns. So I think we have to take into account not just the vehicular, mobility, but also how the individuals are going to be utilizing the space and continuing to use the space.
Makes perfect sense. I I have used the parking lot to cut through on my way when I'm going around downtown. And but when the building is now there, that diagonal cut through will no longer be available to pedestrians. They'll be forced to walk on sidewalks, which is actually better than pedestrians walking through a parking lot. But yeah, I get your point. I don't think that shortcut that we're talking about is going to be a shortcut anymore. It's basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's people cutting through the alley from Clark Street to say where like Celtic Knot is. It's or going into the apartment building in the back. The rear entrance seems to be just as popular as the front entrance. So it's a concern. It's a legitimate concern. So I want to make sure that we fully take the pedestrian scenario into account. And the other thing is you can put a stop sign on. You can put whatever you want. Cars aren't going to stop for the stop sign. They're just. I mean, we all say that, but cars don't stop very well for stop signs. I mean, if we are going to be realistic and honest, if and I've done this, and I'm out a lot on the roads, and if there's not a police car sitting there, it's sort of a stop, or the brake lights might go on, but you have to be mindful of the sight lines to make sure that a slowing car is going to have enough time to see, the pedestrian and not fully rely on a complete stop.
Sure.
Okay, Alderman Rainey?
The problem with this alley is that it's there. And it doesn't matter if a 70-seat restaurant is built in that parking lot that is going to require 18-wheeler coming with beer and food to deliver. That alley is there. It doesn't matter what is built there. That alley is there, and it's a problem for anybody to drive through. It's there. And that people don't stop at stop signs, that people walk in the alley is not a reason to discuss the problems with this building, I don't think. I mean, people are going to have to adjust if a building is built. What I'd like to hear is from our staff if these changes were made in some degree to address direction or concerns of our staff. I'd like to hear from our staff, did the changes you're proposing address their concerns, and is the building more acceptable to our staff because of the changes you've made?
Right.
Instead of us bickering back and forth,
Sure.
Is it this or that or the other? So could I hear from whoever it is that's driving the boat on our staff regarding this?
Right.
Hello? Anybody here?
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Alderman Rainey?
Yes.
Hi.
There you are.
We provided,
tell us about this.
For any plan development, the staff will review an application and then provide a review letter to the applicant. So we provided that. I believe we had 3 meetings of the Design and Project Review Committee, DAPR. We went over the project.
Could I just interrupt for 1 minute? From the last time we visited with these folks to now, this change that we've had, what happened?
We received this file this afternoon.
Because of what?
Because of the discussion that was here last time we met.
There's no interaction with staff directing any changes?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right.
So, Alderman Fisk?
Thanks. Yeah, we're here tonight, Alderman Rainey.
And I wrote to you asking you for anything, and I got nothing back.
I didn't get your email.
Well,
I'm
you
sorry.
didn't look at it then.
No, I do.
All right.
I didn't get it. I'm sorry.
All right.
I would have been happy to talk to you about this. So when I asked for the to hold this over until the meeting tonight, it was specifically to address the issues of height and parking, because those seem to be the most relevant ones from last time. I will say that, and I think I've mentioned this at the meeting before, that when we first started talking about a building on the library lot, The first meeting I had was with the folks at 1738 Chicago Avenue. The developer and architect came to that meeting, and half of the meeting we spent standing in the alley, walking up and down the alley, and talking about how the alley is used. Now, I will say that with the parking inside this building, it's going to be totally different than what the surface lot is now. The surface lot is, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of parking. People are walking from all over the lot to cross over at will across the alley. With the parking in the parking garage of the building, there's going to be one point where people are coming out of that parking garage at a dedicated crosswalk with a stop sign to cross over to a sidewalk to go into the library. It's going to be a much safer route for pedestrians to take. The other problem that we had in the alley is, for some reason, when 1738 Chicago Avenue was built, there was a handicapped access that somehow our staff allowed to be built emptying into the alley directly. We think that's unsafe. It encourages handicapped pedestrians in the alley, which I don't think anyone on our staff today would recommend. And the developer has offered to relocate that handicap access directly onto Chicago Avenue, and there's a very convenient and easy way to do that. So trying to keep as much pedestrian traffic out of the alley, I think, is important. Most of the pedestrian traffic that occurs in the alley right now is as a result of the parking lot. There are a few students that go in and out of the back of McManus Hall, but generally most of that traffic comes off of Orrington Avenue. And I don't think the Women's Club exits onto the alley directly. They do have a parking lot where they pull in, but I don't think there's a lot of pedestrian traffic that's generated from there. So I guess in trying to answer that question, I think it can work, and I think it can work in a more safely than it does now.
Alderman Wilson? Oh, you okay, sorry. Okay. Who's like?
Mine.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was Melissa. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Alderman Nguyen, I'm sorry.
Okay, I think I've figured out where I'm confused. The number of, I wanted to ask some questions of the developer. So I've gone back to look at the materials that we got the last time, and my understanding from reading this is, and if the staff would correct me if I'm wrong, 213 parking spaces are required for the office building. And the prior plan had a number of those parking spaces within the building, and now those are not there. So if 213 parking spaces are still required, and that you're going to be leasing 50 spaces across the street, and then this material does say possibly Sherman Avenue and Maple Avenue. So no, but I'm talking about the office spaces. So you need 213 required office spaces, and what's available on Church Street? It sounds like there was 120 or 170 available on Church Street.
The required parking, it's 211 or 213, whichever it is. I had 211 in my report, so maybe I made a small adjustment. But that's with the old building. We've lost the floor.
Okay, so
I don't know what the new requirement is. Paul, did you?
For the office, you mean?
For the new office.
It's going to be, I don't know the exact numbers, obviously going to be less because we have less square footage.
Right.
But you're right.
So the zoning staff hasn't seen this yet.
Right, yeah, there hasn't been an opportunity to get the drawings and the supplementary material.
All right, well, that explains some of this. Okay.
Right, so let's say it's 170, and with some forgiveness for the calculation off the top of my head. So then, since we're now providing no parking for the office users,
right,
It's just like many years ago, I worked in downtown Evanston in a building with no parking, with no parking garage. So they're going to lease spaces in Chicago Avenue. My original report said about 70. It could be up to 120. There were empty spaces when we did some counts in the garage, as well as then the rest would be split between Maple and Sherman. And I believe that it's at least 300 spaces in each garage that are available to accommodate the parking.
Maple Avenue is a long way to walk for an office worker.
And thank God for, I spent a long time there. I used to have to walk a long way too. And then as I got seniority, I got to a closer parking lot, so.
Well, what if you're taking the L?
Okay, thank you.
I mean, it's not much further than like the train station or the L station, so.
Thank you.
It also, when we talked to staff about this, I think it's also duly noted that this is a TOD development, it's a transit-oriented development. It's less than 1 block from the Metro and both the Purple Line. So you have to take that into account, which no one is. I think we want to be a little bit transit-oriented development, and I think there will be a lot of workers. Right now, the feelers that are out there, a tenant will probably come from the city of Chicago, relocate here, and a lot of the staff will be coming from the city out to Evanston. So just that's what was talked about with the city staff, that this is truly a TOD development. So thank you.
Okay, Alderman Fisk.
I'd like Jill Valen to tell us a little bit about what's available in the Church Street garage.
Jill Veland, Parking Division Manager, Madam Chairman, and members of the committee. Right now, we've done an analysis in the Church Street garage, and for about 12 hours of the day, between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m., we have, on average, 15% occupancy. In the early morning, it starts to fill up. We get to about 20-25% occupancy. When we hit 11 o'clock, the peak times are between 11 and 3. We average 50% occupancy in the garage. A couple times a month, depending on if there's a special event in the area during the day, the peak occupancy, and this is literally 1 to 3 days out of each month, gets to a maximum of 70%. There is about 5 days, one being 4th of July, but there's a couple other big days where we get to 90 plus occupancy. And that's for the entire year. So the majority of time, it's a 50% occupancy during those peak hours, and it drops significantly after 3 o'clock. Doesn't pick up again until late morning.
And how many spaces are in the garage?
So we have, for the public, we have 589 spaces. So there's well over 200 plus spaces. The reason for the, since I've been here, I have actually, when we've looked at leases for developers, I don't want to be tied to one garage. I want the ability, if something changes for the public, to make that developer go to a different garage. So I'm the one who recommended that it be Sherman and Maple, because I think the uses change. And as you can imagine, people want to have the closest spaces, but I feel like the city should keep the flexibility to use any of those garages in order to meet the demand. And I think customers always need to take priority over the longer term parkers, which are the employees. I think they can walk a little bit farther in the morning and the afternoon to get to their parking spaces. So that's how I look at it, and so I was the one who recommended that.
And could I ask you another question? Evanston Place currently has leased up to how many spaces?
I do not know the exact number, but they have a few hundred spaces in the garage, and they, I think, are only 30% leased. That's an approximate from the last time we talked to them. So they're not even close to the spaces that.
So they're probably looking at renegotiating their lease with the city.
Well, they actually own those spaces. We don't. So there's potential out there for us to work with them to open up more spaces for public parking, for sure.
Okay. So the point is there's availability there.
Okay. Are there any more questions from the dais up here? I'm thinking that we're going to need to have this proposal, this new revised proposal, spelled out in more detail for us before we can make any kind of a judgment and decision. But I do want to recognize that we have a number of people who've come tonight to speak, and of course now you've got a new project to speak to. Right. So I'll call you up to come give your comments, and if you want to hold your comments till you get to see the full new proposal next time, that would be fine as well. And then at some point we'll actually have some kind of a motion for how we're going to proceed after tonight. Okay. Beg your pardon? A motion to approve, right. To introduce, right, yeah. Right, yeah. Did you want to say more, Alderman Fisk?
If I understand correctly, the developer has spent almost $250,000 on the plans and the work so far. And so it was my recommendation based on the comments from the committee at the last meeting to bring this to the committee, bring their changes to the committee to see if the committee was amenable to those changes. And before investing any more money, another $100,000 in redoing the entire application. So my hope would be that we could introduce that tonight to council, and that the developer would come back and present all of the documents as amended at our council meeting in 2 weeks, rather than holding it in committee.
Okay. I think now we'd like to hear from the public. So I'll call you up and I'll mention 3 names, and if you'd kind of get ready to speak. So we have Lori Howick, and then Lori Osborne, and Sarah Ward.
Hello, my name is Lori Howick. I'm a resident of 1738 Chicago Avenue at the other end of the block from the Women's Club of Evanston. I spoke at your last meeting and asked several questions. I have not yet received answers to those questions, so I'd like to reiterate them for the record and wonder how to get those answers. The first question would be, I've heard mentioned $1 million in taxes that this building is proposed to be generating. I'm wondering what proportion of that will go to the city itself. I'm wondering what the current gross and net revenue from the current parking lot is. Obviously, if the 74 spaces go back inside with meters, that might not be as big of an issue as it is if they're lost, but I'd still like to know and have it on the record what the current revenue is. And I guess my other questions are sort of moot at this point because of all the changes, but those 2 I'd like to have answered at some point. Thank you.
Okay. So if you could give us your questions in writing, it'd be easier for us to follow up. Thanks. Okay, Lori Osborne. I'll hold my comments. Okay, and Sarah Ward.
I'm Sarah Ward, 220 Hill Avenue, Knightstown, Indiana. I'm the national president of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. I've appreciated having representatives here before, but since I was in town, I won't be back in 2 weeks. I wonder if you've all gone down and looked in the alley where it's marked, because I have, and I'm concerned just cars going through there, and I know how they zip through, they always have, plus the garbage trucks, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, my other concern we were completely missing on here. I saw where the Women's Club got a little speck there, and we're at the other end. Our Willard House is over 150 years old, was the first house in the whole Chicago area to be recognized on the National Register. And we have lots of people coming, and we're expecting more as we do some more development. And I just wonder, going down Chicago Avenue, you're going to completely ruin the scene of that block. So I guess I'm appealing to your historic interest and how prominent a part the WCTU has played during the development of Evanston. So I certainly hope you'll reconsider. I am a town council president of a little town, and I know what it's like to have fiscal problems and all of those things. I also know what it's like to inherit problems formed by an earlier council. So I want to give you that little warning. Please don't do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming. Joan Safford, and then Sarah Shostak and Bruce Ennenbach.
I printed out a copy of my remarks, Joan Safford, 1618 Westlake. I printed out a copy of my remarks in larger type and then left it on my kitchen counter, so which is typical. I wanted to address some of the representations made by the developer, which we did not have an opportunity to respond to because they were the last speakers. In his rebuttals to the community testimony before the Plan Commission and his remarks to the committee, the developer rejected the objection that the rezoning of the library parking lot from R6 to D3 would constitute spot zoning. He argued that the two lots are not spot zoning because they are contiguous to a D3 zoning district, which extends to the middle of the alley behind the two lots. Because there are many areas in Evanston where an alley is all that separates the residential zone from an intense commercial business use zone, treating the alley as a bridge for a zoning change for this project would seriously weaken the zoning code's protection. Moreover, the lot that holds the library is the sole D3 lot in the entire square block bounded by Church, Orrington, Clark, and Chicago. It, in its own way, is a spot zone, but of course it must be said about the library that it is not the height, it is consistent in its height with the neighborhood, and it is consistent in its outlook with the neighborhood, and it has people coming and going as all of those residences do to the north. To the north of the D3 zone, that single D3 zone, is residential housing, multifamily residential housing, extending all the way up Orrington and around the corner onto Clark, all of it consistent in height with R6, although zoned D2. On both evenings, the developer also pointed to the existing and proposed multi-story buildings in the vicinity to suggest that the proposed building is appropriately sited and that the zoning should be changed. He stated that if one does not, and I'm going to quote him here, take a myopic view of this one thing, referring to the Francis Willard House and to the campus and to the Women's Club and to the R6 zoning on both sides of Chicago Avenue, but it looks instead at the community of buildings in the whole area. It's not such a great thing to think it might be, and this is a quote from him, it's not such a great leap to think it might be better as a D3 than as an R6. Looking at a community of buildings in a whole area is not a workable standard in making a decision in rezoning in a city like Evanston. The precedent set by a decision based on the view, on that particular view, that you would look at the greater area around, would encourage incremental rezoning to the detriment of residential neighborhoods all over the city. Your decision in this case instead should be based on the existing standards of the zoning ordinance for the map amendment and for planned developments in D3. Those are the standards that the Plan Commission used to make that their 4-1 decision to recommend that you vote against the application. I'd like to just cite a few quotes or references to what they said. They were looking at the two questions: whether the proposed plan development meets the required standards for map amendments from R6 to D3 zoning, and second, whether the proposal meets the required standards for a plan development in a D3 district. On amending the zoning map, Colby Lewis stated, "My issue is with the request for rezoning. My feeling is that it is appropriately zoned R6 residential district, regardless of the request for an office building. The essential character of Chicago Avenue going north from Church Street is residential, and although it is contiguous with a D3 on the west side, that is also essentially residential development and of a similar kind and feeling in the R6 area. It does feel like like spot zoning to me to allow an office use. I just don't feel that office on this site is really compatible with the area that is not only residential, but also contains historically registered buildings." And Commissioner Isaac commented, "It comes down to whether the downtown district should be extended into this lot. The rezoning is the linchpin. The biggest issue is whether the lot should be rezoned." And Chairman Lewis added, "If spot zoning or contiguous zoning is an issue, then that's a no, even though the city asked for it." As stressed by Commissioner Pagozzi and agreed to in remarks of all other commissioners, the project's design, height, and mass is not compatible with the overall character of the existing development in the immediate vicinity. And I did not hear the developer say anything about the concerns that came up at the Plan Commission, which were that the side lots are still 5 feet and not the 15 feet required, even under planned development when you're next to a residential building or building which has been a residence.
And
for
so,
these
Joan,
reasons,
can you wrap up?
Yes, I will. For these reasons, the Plan Commission found the application inconsistent with the standard for the map amendment of subsections 345A and 6345B of the zoning code. That's the map amendments. And the last part, which is very brief, is, and on the standards for plan development in D3 district, the committee again pointed to the incongruity and incompatibility of the building's bulk, height, and scale in the surrounding development in the immediate vicinity. And in addition, it found that the developer offered insufficient public benefits in exchange for the many variations in height and bulk and setbacks required by the project. And for these reasons, the Plan Commission, as I stated before, voted 4-1 against it. I urge you, on the basis of this, to reject the zoning amendment and the plan development.
Okay, thank you.
Even in its new incarnation.
Okay, Sarah Shostak.
Of course, none of us had the opportunity to see what the changes were going to be that came in this afternoon, which is very close to the time of the meeting. It has struck me, though, as I've been trying to sort through what's been going on over the course of 2 years, that the project did not evolve. DAPR had registered questions and concerns in July of 2018. When the project came back in November of 2018, the list of DAPR concerns remained largely ignored. Nothing happened after the Plan Commission vote against the project, and then there was your vote last time. I think that what I am seeing is that there has not been an earnest and respectful desire to build something that fits this challenging site in Evanston. The terms of the PSA would have been met. They signed these. It's just at the 11th hour of 2 strikes before midnight that we hear something different. We don't know if there are going to be changes in the list of public benefits, which were not meaningful. They still aren't meaningful. And if you're going to talk about the parking, providing public parking when people prefer open parking, and talk about the off-site parking in the garage as a public benefit, that just simply doesn't add up at all. I would also like to say, since I think I am the person who allegedly stabbed the developer with my comments the last time, there is a big difference between 544 jobs, 544 new jobs, which were claimed originally in the DAPR packet, and the number of 150. I'm not talking about the difference between 544 and 500. If you state in one place that the number of new jobs is 544 and somewhere else 150, that's a significant difference if you are claiming that this is an infusion of new money into the city that's going to be a catalyst. So I don't think I was stabbing anybody. I think I was quite fairly pointing out some discrepancies in the developer's own words. I would also like to say on the subject of the studies, I don't recall what the specific dates are right now for parking versus traffic, but I did notice that several of these dates were at times that would be guaranteed to show lack of traffic in that parking lot. You have a study date the day after Labor Day. Northwestern's not here. If you have a study date in March at the end of the winter quarter when spring vacation and finals are coming, it's going to be a different thing. So I think it's been not a very good selection of opportunities to test what's going on. Also, McManus has 110 parking spaces. It's not just a matter of students walking through the alley. The alley is where their garage empties out. So I think there are still many things, particularly in the area of public benefits, meaningful public benefits, that would balance the very considerable ask of the community that have not been addressed. And I hope that we will learn something more about that. I mean, the city owns this lot. You do not have to sell this lot. If the best thing for the time being, if it's more in the public interest not to have a development, well, something more appropriate for the site and the alley materializes, I think that would be a gain for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. So Bruce Enenbach, and then Janet Steidel and Carl Klein.
Hi, Bruce Enenbach. I had a lot of problems with this project, not aside from number of stories and parking. But right now, before us, we have a packet that's it's obsolete. It's not up to date. We have no valid public record right now. It's improper, I think, for this council to move forward to even introduce a project on the basis of a rumored letter to Steve Haggerty. As there are significant changes in this proposal, this needs to return to DAPR and the Plan Commission, both of whom have rejected this rather resoundingly, in order to receive proper vetting by said committees and commission as well as the public. I don't think we can go any further on this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet Steidel, Carl Klein, and then Justin Scherer, Houston Scherer.
Hi, my name is Janet Steidel. I live at 1401 Davis Street. It seems to me that previous building of 11 stories had 120 parking spaces. That's right? It didn't? How many did it have? Do you know? This building has? 88. This one has 88. So you've gotten rid of the compact?
I'm sorry, 78.
That has a total of 78 parking spaces, and 74 are public. So you have 70, they're all public. Did you know that one of the characteristics of Class A office space is ample parking? I just thought I'd throw that out there. Anyway, I have to agree with Bruce that this is a different building, and it needs to go through zoning again. It needs to go in front of DAPR again, and it needs to go in front of the Plan Commission. Because the reasons why it was recommended not to go forward didn't have to do with height. And they had to do with parking and 6 other variances, and none of those have changed. So I urge you not to pass this through to City Council. I think it's unfair to make a decision on something that we don't know the details of. that it's even unclear from the developer and the architect what the details are. I think it's unfair to make a decision on behalf of the city of Evanston based on pretty sketchy details. Thanks.
Thank you. Carl Klein.
Good evening. At the last P&D meeting, concerns were voiced regarding whether or not the developer could be held to the 17 conditions spelled out in Ordinance 4-0-19 based on their lack of adherence to the terms regarding building height and parking requirements. I read through these conditions, which ranged from site controls to pay stations. Condition E, traffic study, caught my eye. It reads, within 1 year of the issuance of the final certificate of occupancy for the building, the applicant must submit a traffic study analyzing the turning movements and parking utilization within the garage accessed off the alley immediately west of the site, including analysis of any incidents adjacent to the site. Based on the analysis of the traffic study, the city reserves the right to require additional traffic calming measures or operational restrictions. The condition in the ordinance is particularly disturbing. It is anticipating there will be, quote, traffic incidents, unquote. What is the wisdom of approving a building that you know has a likelihood of posing a threat to public safety, especially in an alley of such high pedestrian traffic, which includes the most vulnerable, our children, Northwestern students, and our seniors? The planned development should not be approved with the site and building details which warranted Condition E. Thank you.
Thank you. And Houston Scherer?
I've spoken against the building 4 times. I'm going to defer this time.
Okay.
I still think the liability issues in the alleyways are terrible for the city.
Okay, then our last speaker is Amy Curson, attorney for the Women's Club.
Good evening. Amy Curson from the law firm Reyes Curson on behalf of the Women's Club. The City Council members have a difficult decision in front of you because you're both the seller of the property and the arbiters of what should happen with the development. You have placed yourselves in the uncomfortable position of having to decide both what you receive as sellers and the allowances that you give as the people who determine what sellers are allowed to gain back from the property. Given this uncomfortable situation in which the council finds itself, it is incumbent upon you to return this matter back to the Plan Commission and DAPR for a thorough review and to not go forward tonight with an introduction of a plan that has already been rejected by these bodies, so robustly opposed by the community, including the women's group, and has so many reasons as articulated by those who came before me that the plan should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Members of the council, any more? Alderman Fisk?
Thank you. I just wanted to try to answer a couple of questions that were raised. One was about the zoning. The zoning on the east side of Orrington is D3. No, it's D2 and D3. So this particular parcel that is actually 2 original parcels. That is the surface parking lot. The south half is D3, touches D3. The north half touches D2. So I don't think that is spot zoning. The other thing I wanted to point out again is that since 1993, which is I think 1993 or 1994 when the zoning ordinance was passed, these parcels have been zoned R6. And R6 zoning calls for an 85-foot tall building plus an additional 12 feet plus up to 4 floors of parking, which is roughly a taller building than what we're talking about here. When we first had meetings with the adjacent property owners, one of the benefits that was raised was the fact that an office building would be a quiet, cleaner use for all of its neighbors, especially if you're looking at a residential building. in the heart of downtown that has a lot of move-in, move-out effect on the neighbors. So an office building tends to be quiet after dark. It tends to be dark. It doesn't impede on anyone else's enjoyment of their residential property. So that was a benefit, and we talked about that in discussions with the folks, especially the folks at 1738 Chicago Avenue, who would be affected by this. I don't think there's very many people at the WCTU after dark. There are tenants in the two houses that flank the Francis Willard House. But there's not a lot of folks on that site. The Women's Club tends to have events in the evening on weekends, and of course the adequate parking in the parking garage is going to be a benefit to them. Also, the public benefits that the developer has offered to the adjacent property owners, I think, were not adequately considered by either DAPR or the Plan Commission. The last thing I want to say is that I've been involved in the discussions on this for a long time now, and I have found this developer to be patient and easy to work with. I mean, trying to sit down with everyone and solve problems with the understanding that this is a unique lot is something that we don't always see with developers who come and want to have a project in Evanston. But I've been very impressed with that, and I think part of that is because we told them early on that was going to be part of the process. Now, I understand that some of you would like to start this over again, and I don't feel that is the proper process. It's certainly not the process we followed in other developments. The E2 project, I guess, would be an example of precedent set by the council. Unfortunately, I disagreed with that one, but that did not go back. So I don't think that this is something that needs to go back to DAPR or the Plan Commission. This is something for the council to consider, and I think the council is certainly doing a good job of addressing the issues that are involved here. So I encourage you to at least send the signal to the developer that this is a project that we would like to have more information on, and give them the opportunity to revisit this, or not revisit it, but to make the changes that they have suggested and bring this to council. But I think our conversation here is one that has been good, but I think it's now time for this to go to the full council so that everyone else can opine on it as well.
Okay, I'm going to chime in first, Alderman Wilson. So I do appreciate all the time that the developer and the architect have been putting into this proposal, and I appreciate that you've come back to us with more what we asked for, the not quite so tall building and with all the parking on the spot. I guess I'm reluctant to ask you to spend another 2 weeks to work on this, given the way my vote is headed. I don't think we appreciated way back when how difficult it was going to be to design an office building for this special sensitive site between two Evanston landmark properties. In hindsight, before we had offered the property for sale, I wish we had asked for some evaluation of just what type of building would be both financially feasible and likely to give us a project that would be in keeping with what the community would like to see and in keeping with the historic anchors that are its neighbors. I appreciate that the building is now closer to what our purchase and sale agreement asked for, but I still have two very important concerns that are not being addressed here. And one is the impact of such a large building on the adjacent landmark properties. The minimal side yard setback of only 5 feet on both the north and the south side they're really going to crowd those adjacent landmark properties to their detriment. In particular, I'm concerned about the property to the north. The lack of the required 15-foot setback is going to doom the historic trees that are right along that border of the WCTU campus. The trees won't survive losing half of their crown and half of their roots. And having such a tall building so close to that property is going to make it really difficult. It'll cast a deep shadow over that property pretty much for the whole year, make it extremely challenging for the WCTU campus to have any kind of reasonable landscaping in that most adjacent part. And I am continue to be concerned about the impact on the alley. The proposed extension of the building into the alley makes it even more crowded and constricts the traffic and further impairs the sightlines for traffic. So I'm not even going to get into public benefits because I also don't think that the public benefits really offset the many site development allowances that are being requested. So, I mean, the $4 million that would come to the city with the sale of the property is certainly appealing, but I don't believe that we should accept it in exchange for an inappropriate building that's so incompatible with its landmark neighbors. Alderman Wilson.
Thank you. So I'm just going to address the, because I think the rest of the points have been pretty well covered collectively, the introduction issue. I do think that DAPR and Plan Commission both did a good job in laying out what the concerns were. And I also get the impression from the applicants that they've gotten, about as far as they can go as far as making accommodations are concerned. So I'm not inclined to suggest that they go back. Number one, I don't think it's going to change the result. Number two, if you're opposed to it, sending it back, it can only turn out worse than you want. So you send it back, you get the same result. You're kind of where you are now. Or they might say, yeah, it is okay. But I think maybe Alderman Fisk had pointed this out. It's also probably fair to the applicants just to, not to keep putting them through more hoops. So if it's going to go forward, let's kind of move it in that direction and make a decision and either let them know, up or down. And I think the community deserves to have the answer as well. I don't think it's going to, again, I don't think the committees are going to change. I do expect that the materials will be complete well in advance of the next meeting. So if we introduce it tonight, it'll be up for action next time. If we get materials, the day before action, I will not vote on something where I get the materials the day before action because the community will not have had a fair enough opportunity to see any of those changes. So, whatever there is, on the table now, well in advance, and we put these things on the city's website. So hopefully I assume people are tracking the proposal on the website. So if we can get that even in advance of the packet, that would be useful too, so people could have adequate time to think that through. So that's my inclination. I do feel like we should introduce it. We should make a decision, and I just think that's fair to everybody who's feels passionately about it one way or the other.
Alderman Nguyen.
Yes, I'll be very brief. For all of the reasons cited by Alderman Revelle, I can't support introducing it. And in addition, for the very close reading by Carl Klein of discovering this subsection E that requires a traffic study be done with an agreement by the developer that extra traffic calming measures be put into the alley. So to me, that I've never seen anything like that in an agreement that the city has entered into or that any other developer has entered into. So, to me, I think that's an indication that the staff really does see this alley as being compromised. And so for that reason, and I appreciate the developer has worked very, very hard on this. I think it was a very difficult site. I agree with Alderman Revelle. I regret my vote in favor of an RFP on this site without having understood fully what could be built. I do think the fact that 9 out of the 10 developers who looked at this backed away and said they did not think it could be done. And so I don't think it should move forward. I think that something else may come to the city later in the future, something very different. I don't think we'll have a residential property there. I don't think the city needs to sell this property for any more residential property. We have loads of people who are happy to do residential property without buying property from us. So for all of those reasons, I think that this is not the right project for this site, and so I don't support introducing it. Thank you.
Okay, so seeing no more lights, I think we're ready for the vote, which is the vote to introduce this Ordinance 4-0-19, granting a special use permit for a planned development located at 1714, 1720 Chicago Avenue, and amending the zoning map. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. So do we need to have a show of hands or something? Could you, a roll call? What?
Can you just do a voice vote?
What, beg your pardon?
Can you just do a voice vote? It's unclear how many, roll call,
Right.
how many people said
okay.
no.
Sure. Alderman Rusivin?
Aye.
Alderman Sefrin? Alderman Rainey?
Aye.
Alderman Fisk? Alderman Nguyen? Alderman Wilson? Alderman Ravel?
No.
So, motion carries.
So 7 to 2, yes, what was that, 5 to 2, losing track here. Okay, thank you. Are there any items for discussion or communications? Then entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.